Pursuant to Internal Revenue Service guidance, be advised that any federal tax advice contained in this program is not intended to be used, and it cannot be used by any person or entity for the purpose of avoiding any tax penalties that may be imposed by the Internal Revenue Service or any other U.S. federal taxing authority or agency, or promoting, marketing, or recommending to another party any transaction or matter addressed in this show. The opinions expressed by the host and the guests are their own and may not be used as authoritative advice. Any use of this material without the written consent of the host is strictly prohibited.
You're listening to the IRS Radio Hour with attorney Steven Leahy. Steven has helped hundreds of Chicagoans recover from financial disaster, and he wants to help you and your family. There are resolutions, and you will hear about all those resolutions during today's informative discussion on the IRS Radio Hour on AM 560 The Answer. Now, here's your host, attorney Steven Leahy.
Welcome back, and I am your host, attorney Steven Leahy. I love that song, The Tax Man. One day we'll have to go through the words because they're funny. But very appropriate, I have to say. So one day we'll have to go through the words of that song.
Yeah, after the IRS thing is settled, which is...
Well, never.
Never be settled. Unless, I'll tell you.
So, on my website, I have a blog, and I write a article.
And what is the address of the website?
It's chicagotaxteam.com, and the blog's there. And, again, we have the IRS Radio Hour link, and you follow that link, and you can get to the streaming or the podcasts and hear us. And you can also find it on 560theanswer.com. They have a podcast and they have it listed there.
I was remiss in mentioning 560 The Answer in the last segment. So the fact
it's a very popular AM 560 The Answer has gotten a lot of news lately. So but we won't talk about that. But let's talk about let's talk about the my blog this week. And this week the blog,
and what is the blog? What was the entry about?
The article is "What is compliance and why is it important?"
Okay.
When people come to see me, one of the first things I do, I have a big television screen, a 60-inch television, and I use it as a whiteboard. And people sit in front of the television screen. And one of the first things I do when I'm explaining how we go about solving IRS problems, I put on big letters on the top, compliance. And everybody says, "What does that compliance mean?" Right, so compliance is a IRS word. There's three types of compliance according to the IRS. There's filing compliance, there's reporting compliance, and then there's payment compliance. So we talk about filing compliance, and that means you file on time and you comply with their regulations. The second type is reporting compliance, and that talks about how accurate the filing is. So I might file on time, but how accurate is the filing? Is that filing? And then the third one is payment. So how often do people pay on time? What they owe? So these are the three types of compliance. And whenever you're behind in the IRS and they're coming after you to collection, this is called the collection department.
And speaking of behind, go ahead.
So the collection department in the IRS is a specific department that comes after people to collect, and I always say that they're the biggest, baddest collection agency out there because they have powers that are
far beyond that of mortal men.
That is absolutely true, unsurpassed. I think I talked about this last week, is that the federal courts have more power than them, and that's good because sometimes you can use the federal courts to protect yourself against the IRS, and that's important. And there's a tax court too. Bankruptcy can help you. Tax court, you can take these issues to a judge in tax court, and they can decide these issues whether they're right or wrong. So you're not alone. And this all happened with the Taxpayer Bill of Rights in 1996. But I get ahead of myself.
You're ahead of yourself. So what about compliance? Why is it that important?
So in order for someone with a tax problem to resolve it, before the IRS will even let you resolve it, you have to be in compliance. Okay, so that means I have to have filed all my taxes and paid my quarterly taxes if that comes due. And because if a taxpayer receives this, they get a notice of levy on wages, salary, and other income. That's the title of this form that they send you. And this tells you, hey, we've already levied things from you. So they probably levied your bank account, or they levied your wages, or some things. I had a doctor's office, and they had levied all of the insurance companies where he received his money. So all of those insurance companies were now ordered to send every dollar that they owed this doctor to the IRS. So he had no money because that's where he got all of his money from his insurance companies. So once you get this notice of levy.
How does the notice arrive?
It arrives in the mail. So it's not, and this is not certified mail. So, but you usually get a certified mail before this. So once you get the notice of levy, it's really hard to stop that levy if you have unfiled returns, because you only have 21 days to do something. And if I have unfiled returns before they'll even consider stopping the levy, I have to file all my back returns, and that takes time and effort and money. And money, and try to get in compliance. So that's a big thing, getting in compliance. So one of the people come to me in my office, and they sit down and they have a big stack of mail that they receive from the IRS, and most of it's unopened. So here's my advice to people. Open the mail, okay?
But it's scary.
I know it is scary. It is, but it's scarier what can happen if you don't open the mail. And so before they can send a notice of levy that I mentioned earlier, they have to send you Form CP-297. Now, the IRS has a number for every form that they send, and they have a regulated sequence of letters that they send. So usually this notice of intent to levy comes certified mail. So if you get certified mail from the IRS, go get it.
And then when you wake up after passing out, if you sign for it, what do you do? Should I call a lawyer right away?
You should call. So
should I just give up?
No, you have to call somebody right away. Now, because this notice of intent to levy, it gives you 30 days to file an appeal. So you can file an appeal and stop the levy. Now, sometimes the appeal can take months, many months to resolve. So while you're resolving that, while that appeal is pending, you can go back and finish all your taxes and get everything ready and try to fight that levy so they never institute the levy. And that's the important thing. Mm-hmm. Stop the levy from ever being issued. Once it's issued, it's harder to stop. Now, we stop them all the time, and that's a big part of our work. Is a lot of times people don't do anything until they get a notice of levy and they don't get a paycheck, and then they have to move. Now, if you're not getting a paycheck and they're stopping your they're going after your bank account, hard to hire a lawyer because you don't have any money. And lawyers generally want money, and they cost. So you want.
I'll just be quiet on it.
So you want to do that before you get a levy. That's ideally that's what you want to do. Now, often people don't do that. They wait too long. Don't wait too long. Open your mail. That's my biggest thing. Now, once you resolve your IRS problem, again, we talked about how to do that. You can get an installment agreement. You can get an offer in compromise. You can get currently not collectible status. Any of these remedies, one of the agreements with the IRS is you have to stay in compliance. So I had someone in my office this week about 941 taxes. And we were talking, and they said, well,
what's 941 taxes?
That's what we talked about last week, which is payroll taxes. So this is business, and they're payroll tax issues. And I asked them, well, do you have any personal issues? Oh, we did, but we have an installment agreement with the IRS, so that's been taken care of. And I said, well, did you file your 2013? Oh, we filed an extension. And I had to break the news to them that an extension means you're not in compliance. And if you're not in compliance, the agreement's broken and your installment agreement is over. Okay, so then they're back in collections. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. And that's why compliance is so important. So it's important to fix the problem. But once you fix the problem, you're promising to the IRS that no matter what happens from here on out, I'm going to stay in compliance. So I've had people come to me and they had a great offer and compromise. So they owed a lot of money and the IRS settled for a little bit of money. But they didn't file their taxes the next year, and so the offer in compromise was rescinded, and they don't have the offer in compromise anymore, and they're back in collections. So this is a huge thing. Compliance is so important. Again, before you can solve the problem, and then after you solve the problem.
No matter how bad this sounds, this is 100% better than it used to be. And we're going to get into that in this next part. But, the funny thing about the word compliance is you find out that 85% of the American people are voluntarily in compliance.
That's right. The IRS calls it a tax gap, and this is what they use all the time to justify in stepping up enforcement. And I think Senator Schumer this last week brought up again they want to hire private firms to go after people. Now this has been brought up many times in Congress and shot down many times, and they keep bringing it up. And I think it's because some law firms that ironically from New York, that would be in front of, would be in charge of this.
Schumer.
No.
He's on one of our infamous Senate lists that we're going to be reading off later on.
So in my office, we also have what we call the IRS Protection Plan, which helps people stay in compliance once you solve the problem. That's almost as big as solving the problem.
Your office, how would somebody get in touch with your office?
So if you have an IRS problem, you should call me at 312-664-6649.
Or
visit my website at chicagotaxteam.com.
Is there any other way?
Yeah, you can. If you have a specific question, you can always email me at questions@irsradio.com. And remember that you can visit my blog. There's lots of information there, and that's also at chicagotaxteam.com.
They can also hear this show on.
That's right. That's right. We're here every Sunday at 5 o'clock, AM 560. The Answer.